Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my talk about cloud security. My name is Stepanyan. I'm from OWASP. I'll tell you about OWASP a little bit later. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is SecureStep9. So if you're on Twitter, I urge you to follow me because I tweet some interesting stuff from the area of cybersecurity and development as well. If you're not on Twitter, I urge you actually to get on Twitter because I think it's probably the best social media network for cybersecurity, and this is where you can learn a lot of information, a lot. So first of all, what is OWASP? OWASP stands for Open Web Application Security Project. We are, first of all, a community. We're a community of volunteers. There are 45,000 volunteers in almost every single country in the world, and we operate via chapters. And also we have a chapter in London that I lead along with two of my colleagues. So we are a non-profit organization, and our aim is to improve security of software. So what we do, we collaboratively develop and provide free and open source tools, free guidance and standards, and you can't see that very well because the screen is a bit too small, but we actually provide free seminars and meetups. So that's quite important for you to know. The most important document about OWASP, and most important thing that you need to know about OWASP is the thing we're most famous for, something called OWASP Top 10, which is a list of top 10 most critical application security risks that was compiled by our experts. It's been around for about 15 years now, even more, and it became very famous after payment card industry, people like Visa, MasterCard, and American Express actually started mandating it to everyone who is taking credit card numbers online to make sure that their applications are free from OWASP Top 10 vulnerabilities. So this is the list of the top 10 vulnerabilities. It is actually quite technical, so I'm not actually going through it, but I'm going to talk about some examples of cloud applications that most of you know and demonstrate why this is important in the cloud. So first of all, what is cloud, right? A lot of people now accept that the most popular thing for the cloud is just somebody else's computer where we run stuff, right? And cloud is now everywhere. I think every single organization is now talking about cloud, 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 cloud. And there's a funny comic here when the boy says, my dad says cloud is the answer to everything. So I think every single organization now has this notion that's like, oh, let's move it into the cloud, right? So yeah, speaking of children, right? Here's another famous comic, I'm not sure if you've seen it, where a child asks what clouds are made of, and that's as well, that's mostly Linux servers. Right, this used to be true, right? But obviously there's another cloud which is made not of Linux servers, but made of Microsoft servers. And what is the problem with Microsoft? Last year we had absolutely huge event affecting cybersecurity, and everyone suddenly found out about cybersecurity. What was it? That was WannaCry ransomware, of course, right? NHS brought down big companies like O2, Telefonica, you name it, right? Everyone was suffering from this ransomware. And yes, if you're running Microsoft and your cloud runs Microsoft, then yes, you're actually susceptible to WannaCry ransomware. So if you're actually running Microsoft Cloud, please remember that it will also be vulnerable to any viruses or malware which you can also encounter on your own personal computer. So cloud applications, yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with them. We use them every day. We use Google, we use Office 365, we use WebEx to talk to colleagues, we use Salesforce to sell stuff, we use SharePoint, we use Box to store some data. But what are these? These are all applications. And because these are applications and they are in the cloud, they are susceptible to security problems, right? Security vulnerabilities. And let me demonstrate you, going back to the OWASP Top 10 vulnerabilities, some very big breaches which involve OWASP Top 10. First of all, LinkedIn was breached recently. 147 million records of everyone on LinkedIn got leaked, right? That was a few years ago. But what that was famous for is the actual vulnerability was very basic SQL injection or SQL injection, as techies like to call it. And yeah, what a very, very big antivirus company called Sophos called it, they said it was one of the lowest hanging fruits on the vulnerability tree. Another big event which happened is Mirai botnet brought down the internet on 26th of October, right? I don't know if you remember, so if you use Amazon or if you watch Netflix, suddenly nothing was available on that day. What happened? There was a massive botnet which was comprised mostly of CCTV cameras, which were all hacked. And they were hacked, why? Because these cameras, they run application, the actual webcam application or CCTV camera application, and they had a vulnerability called operating system command injection. So hackers managed to hack into millions of cameras, take full control, and start sending malicious traffic to the internet, effectively blocking most users on the internet from accessing their favorite websites. Another interesting question for you, is your cloud mining bitcoins? If you have an application in the cloud, how do you know that your server, which sits there somewhere in the cloud, is not mining bitcoins? Well, there's one big company which didn't have a clue, that's Tesla, the famous electric car company, which recently found out that all the cloud servers were mining Bitcoin, were mining cryptocurrency. So that was a bit of embarrassment. Again, why? Because if the application is in the cloud, you don't really have the same visibility if you have the computer in front of you or in your own data center. Here's another OWASP Top 10 vulnerability called components with known vulnerabilities. Right? So when developers write code, not 100% of that code is written by developers. They like to use and reuse components and modules which are already created, right? Because everyone likes to write applications quicker, deliver them faster, right? And there's a very popular component called Apache Struts 2, and it had a known vulnerability last year. And everyone, including the Register magazine, was urging everyone to patch as quickly as possible. As you can see from the date on this article, that was on 9th of March 2017. Well, there was one company which completely ignored this advice, and in July got hacked. And that was one of the biggest hacks of our time so far, Equifax, with 143 million US citizens' data stolen. And that's basically, I think, 40% of the US population, everyone with a credit card, a loan, basically all their data is gone. Why? Again, because they unpatched the application which was known to be insecure. And that happened in Equifax's cloud, where they had an application for taking complaints from people who wanted to complain about their credit score. Another vulnerability on the OWASP Top 10 is called Crosssite scripting. So how many of you use Salesforce? So Salesforce recently silently plugged this vulnerability without telling anyone. But what that allows you to do, it allows attackers to run malicious code on Salesforce. That means that anyone using Salesforce probably got infected. How many people got infected? We don't know, because they just silently found and patched it and only confessed about it a bit later. Another instance of cross-site scripting is SharePoint Online, SharePoint in the cloud. I know lots of people use SharePoint and they like using SharePoint in the cloud. Now, again, if you look at it, last year, approximately a year ago, Microsoft patched cross-site scripting vulnerability in SharePoint, and this was believed to be used by 200,000 organizations and 190 million people. Another serious flaw in Microsoft Cloud is Microsoft Office 365. A lot of organizations these days are running their email using Office 365. But it had a vulnerability in authentication mechanism. And what that vulnerability allowed bad guys to do is to gain access to all the accounts, including all the emails and all the files that you store in your email if you use Office 365. Microsoft were very good, so they actually managed to patch it within 7 hours after learning about the existence of this vulnerability in Office 365. However, for how long this vulnerability was present, nobody knows. Is your email in your organization email leaked? Is somebody read all your confidential files? No one knows. Another Office 365 vulnerability, missing access control, patched recently. So that allowed administrators within your organization, that allowed normal users within your organization to escalate their privileges and become administrators. So if you're just an employee in a company which uses Office 365, this vulnerability allowed that employee, a malicious insider, using a malicious link, basically click on the link, suddenly become administrator. And by becoming administrator, they gain all access to all employees' mailboxes. How scary is that? Again, that was fixed relatively quickly, but again, how long this vulnerability existed, we don't really know. Security misconfiguration is absolutely my favorite OWASP Top 10 vulnerability because it happens everywhere in the cloud. And you read in a lot of magazines and in the press these days. And as you can see here, there's a big headline about S3 leaks, right? So S3, if you don't know, is the AWS service for storing data. And in the past couple of years, there were absolutely spectacular data breaches happening because the data storage in the cloud was misconfigured to allow either public access to them or to allow any authenticated user access to them. So what is happening? The cloud is leaking. It's leaking data. And another very famous leak was Accenture, who actually put a lot of their passwords, private encryption days, and a lot of sensitive data about their clients and their contracts, and they were all leaked last year because somebody discovered that they're completely unprotected. Now, you don't need to be a hacker to know how to hack into the cloud. All you need to do is just use Google. So here's a very simple Google query that you can do on your phone or at home to find out 1.7 million of documents in the cloud. Basically, all you do, you put s3.amazonaws.com in your Google search, and you add ext:/PDF. That query tells Google to find all PDF files that it indexed on S3 storage network. And as you can see instantly, there's some juicy confidential stuff being picked up, right? So it's as easy as Googling this. And using this technique, the amount of data available in the cloud is just scary. So what can people find by just Googling? They can find names, addresses, dates of birth, bank account numbers, because it's all in the cloud, right? Email addresses, phone numbers. Very scary thing, I found some NHS patient referrals from GPs sending them to hospitals, and because their NHS system is connected to Amazon Cloud, there were some Word documents with referrals. So there's another cloud coming about two angels saying it's not very boring in this cloud, right? Because there's a lot of very interesting and juicy stuff that we can look through. So more juicy stuff that I found. Employment contracts, salaries and payroll data, confidential agreements and NDA, non-disclosure agreements, encryption keys, database backups. There were two huge cases last year with AA, Automobile Association, people who rescue our cars, and Page Group, Michael Page Group, which is a very big recruitment company. Their data was found in the cloud because they put the database backups in there. Anyone could download them, restore them, and get access to all their data. And one of my favorite pieces of data you can find in the leaky cloud is the passwords to corporate firewalls. Once you got the password, you can just hack straight in. So I can assure you that all the data which is in the cloud and in AWS is secure, right? So you access it using HTTPS. So that's what most people think, oh, if it's HTTPS, it must be secure. I can assure you that it's stored on encrypted hard drives, right? So this is a highly encrypted Seagate hard drives that Amazon uses. And this is Amazon's highly secure data center in Virginia, in America, which looks like a fortress with lots of security fences. So do not fall into false sense of security when someone says it's secure because it has encrypted hard drive or it has SSL. So what other information you can find there in the cloud? I found about 1.7 million PDF files referencing our government information. 30,000 related to NHS. I had to redux some of the stuff here, but you can see this is the Department of Oncology, which is doing a clinical research and some studied drugs. And yeah, if you just Google it, it just comes up straight. It's like one of the first documents on Google. This is how easy this is if your cloud is leaking. My absolute favorite document I found in the cloud, right, using this leaking technique, is penetration testing report PDFs. Now, this is fun. So it's a good example. A 70 billion turnover global insurance company hired a cybersecurity company to do a scan of all their vulnerabilities, which they've done. And what happened, right? So this document was found in the cloud. And look, anyone can download this PDF and find out exactly where this $70 billion turnover company is vulnerable, because all the URLs, all the vulnerabilities, they're all precise locations, they are in the PDF. So you don't need to do anything because your homework is already done for you. Someone's already done it, right? Leave it to professionals. There you go. Now, don't be fooled into a sense that this is all Amazon and AWS related thing. So what Amazon calls a bucket, right, or AWS bucket for storage, Microsoft, the Microsoft Cloud, they call Azure blob. So I've done a similar search on Google for Azure, and you can see the number of documents is significantly lower. There are about 4,000 documents I could Google for, compared with 1.7 million PDF files. But you can see straight away, in this particular example, it starts coming up with the confidential documents which are only specific for channel partners. So I've done a search on HP, the company which is now split into DXC and Micro Focus. But you can see the first thing I found out is confidential training documents for their partners. I found some security white papers and specs which are flagged as confidential or for internal use only. So what I want you to take away from this talk, that application security is important. It's not your firewall, it's not the SSL, it's application which is being run. So you need to make sure that applications are secured. You need to make sure that developers who are writing applications for the cloud, they're aware of vulnerabilities, and they know at least OWASP Top 10 as a awareness document. And again, there are far more vulnerabilities than 10. The reason why we call them OWASP Top 10, because these are the most frequently happening and the most critical ones, but of course there are more vulnerabilities. I'm going to end with a cloud joke. So what do you call software that has moved into the cloud? Anyone knows? Vaporware. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.